Here are 5 meal in a jar Easter recipes that everyone will love. I've even got a couple of little extra ideas that I'll sprinkle in now and again, a couple of Easter eggs, if you will. A few of these recipes are older and they've been up on my channel for a while, but this first one, it's new. It's a recipe for my mom's Rise and Shine muffins. They're loaded with carrots and pineapple, coconut. They are the perfect start to your day. I've also got the most delicious recipe for your Easter brunch. It's a quiche, and it includes the flaky crust. And mind you, these are all completely shelf-stable recipes here, so you can assemble the jars and take them with you if you're traveling. Super convenient. Then I'll show you something that can serve as a side dish or a main, depending on your needs. These creamy, cheesy company potatoes will delight your taste buds. And no Easter feast is complete without some delicious dinner rolls. Mine can be made from a mix in a jar. They take about an hour and a half start to finish, but most of that time is inactive. They're fluffy and tender, absolutely scrumptious. Even if you're not typically a bread baker, these yeast rolls are definitely doable. This spring green pasta and cream side dish is a wonderful addition to any gathering. The beautiful green vegetables and cream sauce accompany spiraling ribbons of tender pasta. It's not only tasty, but it's just so pretty as well. Now be sure to stick around for the surprise ending. I'm sure it's one you won't want to miss. Thanks for joining me today, y'all. Easter is my very favorite, and I hope these recipes can help make your holiday a memorable one. Welcome to the Freeze Dried Foodie, where you'll find delicious recipes using freeze-dried ingredients. Now, it doesn't really matter what brand you have. So many of us have this type of food on our shelves. On this channel, I'll show you how I cook with mine. Our first recipe is for Rise and Shine muffins. I realize that most of the rest of the world calls these Morning Glory muffins, but this is a new recipe and I hope you love it. My mom always called these Rise and Shine muffins because every time we spent the night with my grandmother, which is my mom's mom, we called her Mama Helen, when she would wake us up in the morning, she would say a scripture verse to us. And when she came in the room, turned on the light, she would say, "Rise and shine, thy light has come," Isaiah 61. And so we always had this kind of muffin at Mama Helen's house. So I think that's why my mom called them Rise and Shine muffins. But they are loaded with great ingredients. You can customize this with different ingredients if you prefer. But this is what I like to put in there. Freeze-dried carrots. And I get those from Freeze Dry Wholesalers. I use the freeze-dried zucchini. You could put in some freeze-dried Granny Smith apples. I was just out. I love the toasted pecans in here. It's such a good crunch. True Orange packets is going to give you the equivalent of adding some orange juice to this. The quick cook oats are so good. It's like oat flour because I blend it up. I do add some whole wheat flour here. It's like a signature flavor. It's so good. And yeah, I'll put the full recipe down in the description box below. I will show you how I put these jars together. You are going to need 2 jars for these. The first one, a pint-sized jar, is where we're going to put all the fruit and veg. And then the second jar, the quart jar, we'll just do all the dry ingredients in there. Now, I did break those carrots up into smaller pieces. You need them, like not in the coins, but in the smaller pieces. Those are freeze-dried carrots. If you're using the dehydrated carrots, you're going to need to put them in the blender and blend them into a powder. Now, I love putting zucchini in any kind of muffin or bread. You can leave that out and just substitute Granny Smith apples, or you could do both. A good bit of pineapple goes in there. I ended up using a snack bag from Wise Harvest, and I crushed that up really good. I'm adding the freeze-dried cranberries. You can add raisins if you prefer, or the craisins. Yeah, I like the freeze-dried cranberries. So good. Now it's time for the coconut. I'm including about 1/4 cup. You can use unsweetened or sweetened coconut here. I prefer the sweetened. And there's a reason why I am going to highly recommend you include that coconut. And it's more than just the flavor. It's the texture, okay? There's something about shredded coconut flakes that's going to give you a mouthfeel that mimics a grated raw carrot. And of course, we don't have those in here, but if you include the coconut, it'll give you that same mouthfeel. So I think it's really important to include that coconut. Okay, moving on to the second jar. This is a quart-sized jar. First of all, just put some flour in the bottom. I'm using a combination of all-purpose flour and whole wheat flour, and you actually need both for this recipe. That signature flavor of these muffins comes from the whole wheat flour, but the all-purpose flour is necessary for good texture, and it just makes a really nice combination. All right, put in what is the equivalent of 2 whole eggs. And then I've got some oat flour. Well, they are quick cook oats that I blended. And then time for the sugars. I'm using 2 kinds of sugar. I've got regular granulated sugar as well as some pourable brown sugar. I like that especially because it doesn't clump and it doesn't get hard in the jar. I went ahead and put the pecans in here because I was going to go ahead and make these for you. So if you're going to leave this on the shelf for quite a long time, you should probably just hold off on the nuts because, you know, they can go rancid on you because the oil's in there. Just be aware, like I wouldn't leave it on the shelf longer than probably 3 or 4 months if you include the pecans. All right, you need some salt because that's going to balance out the flavors. And then baking soda is our leavener, and it's got to have something acidic to react with. And brown sugar is actually mildly acidic. And of course, we've got pineapple in there. So that's going to get some good rise. And then our delicious spices, cinnamon and ginger. Y'all, this is going to taste so, so good. So here are the jars that you could keep stored on your pantry shelf. And if you try this and if you like this, if I were you, I would make up several of these at a time, kind of like an assembly line, because once you have these things ready and waiting on your shelf, then the muffins themselves become something you can do really quickly. Let me show you how I bake up these muffins. The first thing you'll want to do is hydrate that fruit and veg jar. So take out those little packets of true orange. That is just powdered orange juice. And I like to use 4 packets. And so you can go ahead and sprinkle that on the top so that when you add the water, it's going to turn into what's the equivalent of orange juice. And you'll have all of these fruits and vegetables refreshing in orange juice, which I think is brilliant. Okay, I had heated some water on a kettle earlier that morning, so it's just kind of warm water. I think warm water helps things to hydrate a little bit faster. So you could just get hot tap water, whatever. But you want to add about 1.5 cups of hot tap water to get those moving along. You want to make sure, especially that the carrots and the pineapple have plenty of access to water in order to refresh. You just want to make sure everything is nice and hydrated. And because this whole process that I'm going to show you right here, this actually happens very quickly. Doesn't take hardly any time at all. So put some water in there, get that hydrating, and then turn on your oven and get it starting to preheat. So you need your oven at 375, and while that oven preheats, your vegetables and fruit are going to be hydrating. Okay, and then let's deal with the rest of the batter. So get out a large bowl and you can empty your dry ingredients into the bowl. Go ahead and give it a really good stir. Make sure everything is nice and combined. You know, you've got the soda and the salt and the vanilla powder in there. You want to make sure the eggs are really good and mixed in. Okay, and then you can add some water. So I have about 1/3 cup of water and about 1/2 cup of oil. You can use any neutral oil. I like to use coconut oil when I bake, but you could use avocado oil or vegetable oil, whatever. All right, go ahead and give it a stir. If you'll notice, it's way too dry. That's not near enough liquid to create like a batter for muffins. But we're going to add that entire jar of fruits and veg, and it's got liquid in there. So it's going to end up being the perfect amount of liquid. I meant to tell you, you can add whatever fruits and veg you want. You just need to make sure that that pint-sized jar is completely full. If your jar is full, then these measurements for the liquid will work out perfectly. So once you mix that together and let it sit, this is the texture that you can expect. It's just a beautiful batter. And whatever you do, don't lick your spatula because it tastes so good. You're just going to want to eat it raw. I tell you what, I know from experience. All right, so go ahead and spray your muffin tin. Be sure to spray the edges around the edges so that the muffin tops, when they rise, they won't stick. So I got 10 muffins. You'll probably get 9 or 10. And yeah, that is what you're going to put into your oven. You need to bake these muffins for 25 minutes. I baked them for 25 minutes just so they pass the toothpick test. 375 degrees, 25 minutes, and they should have like a nice little rise. They poof up in the oven. The muffins are a little bit more dense than, let's say, a cupcake, right? It's a muffin and it's got whole wheat flour in there. So it's going to be a little more dense. So you might have to cook it a little bit longer than you think. But just so that they pass the toothpick test, you'll be good. You'll need to go ahead and let them cool completely in the muffin tin, and then you can remove them. And yeah, here are our gorgeous muffins, and they are just loaded with all those wonderful flavors. Let me just talk about how these taste. The cinnamon, the brown sugar, the ginger in there, and then of course the whole wheat flour, the oats that I ground up in there. That is like the batter flavor, that base batter flavor. It is so fantastic. Okay. And then when you add in the vegetables and the fruit and the coconut and the nuts, the pecans, I toasted those pecans, and all of those flavors are just so good. The cranberries are a little bit tart. The pineapple, it has just such an interesting texture in there. It's sweet. I highly recommend using that coconut. I used sweetened coconut. And there's just something about the texture of the coconut that will mimic the texture of regular freshly grated carrots that, we don't have in here. We have freeze-dried carrots, but that texture of that grated little crunchy item in there, it's really nice. So I think the coconut mimics that and gives you something that you would otherwise be kind of missing. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth. Just overall, such a fantastic muffin. Y'all are really going to like these muffins, I think. Next up is Quiche Lorraine. The way I have this video set up is I am first going to be showing you how to assemble the jar that's the actual quiche filling, so the egg custard. So I'm going to do that first, and then you'll also see this other little jar which has the ingredients for my pie crust already in it. And I will give you that recipe later on in this video. I'll show you how to make that pie crust and then how to roll it out and everything. Quiche Lorraine is very simple. This is just a traditional quiche Lorraine. You can always add other vegetables to it, but this is going to have the shelf-stable bacon and just some green onions, some yummy seasonings. This recipe will make a very creamy and delicious custard filling for your quiche. I'm starting with a 24-ounce jar. Of course, you could use a quart-sized jar if that's what you have. And I'm just putting the same amount of cheese as eggs in the bottom of this jar. I've got 2 tablespoons of the green onions that are going to go in there. And I'm using just some simple seasonings. Dry mustard is really good paired with anything with cheese in it. And then a pinch of cayenne, a pinch of nutmeg. And I suggest you go light on the salt, just because the bacon's kind of salty, the cheese is kind of salty. Now I do like to keep my heavy cream powder separate, just because I've found in working with this stuff that I like to combine it with water and blend it as to ensure that there are no lumps. So that's why I have kept that in a baggie. And this is what you would keep on your pantry shelf. And that pie crust mix is good for 3 or 4 months, something like that, on the pantry shelf. And then be sure to check the expiration date on your bacon bits, as well as your heavy cream. Just, kind of be aware of expiration dates. When you're ready to prepare this, you're just going to get out kind of a medium-sized bowl and be sure to preheat your oven to 400. Now, like I said, this is a half recipe. It's just enough for one pie crust, not the 2 pie crust recipe I gave y'all before. This is just for one crust. And the amount of ice water you add kind of depends on the weather a little bit, and evidently elevation, I have learned. So here in South Texas, we're pretty close to sea level and we're pretty humid. But I like to add, for half a recipe, I like to add about 3.5 tablespoons of water. At least I did this day. I started with 2.5 and then I added another tablespoon. And the reason was there were just some crumbs in the bottom of that bowl that really weren't mixing in very easily. They weren't incorporating with the rest of it. And I thought, yeah, it needs a little bit more water. So I added 1 more tablespoon, and then it just seemed like things were kind of combining better. The little crumbs at the bottom, they're mixing in, they're adhering to that ball, and that's what you're looking for. So yes, your hands are going to get messy on this one, but it's so worth it. This is a fantastic pie crust recipe. And I'll be sure to link my pie crust recipe video down in the description box below, and it'll have really good detailed instructions for you. And I like to flour my surface, flour my dough, and flour my rolling pin, just so nothing is sticking. I kind of wanted to make sure all of the surface had some flour on it, and then I flattened it into a little disc, and then I just started rolling it out. And you just want to roll it out to be the size of whatever pie plate you're going to put it in. For me, I'm using my grandmother's pie plate. I inherited that from her, and it's so special to me. My grandmother, this is my dad's mom. She was just famous for her pies. I mean, famous as in our family loved her pies. She's the one that would make those apricot fried pies that weren't fried. Oh, so good. Whenever we would go to visit them, she would have multiple pies for us. She would also fry chicken. And we always thought her fried chicken was the best in the world. And I still believe it's true. She had the best fried chicken and the best pies. All right, see how wonderful that pie crust is? It's not fussy. It's really easy to work with. So I'm just putting it in the pie plate there. And if you'll notice, like one little side of that pie crust is not quite as high as it needed to be. And I regretted that later because I couldn't fill it all the way to the top. But yeah, if you can, make sure that pie crust fits all the way up to the top of the sides. And here I am trying to be fancy and crimp the edges. But I was so bad at it, y'all. I had to fast forward that. You would definitely laugh at me. All right, so poke some holes in the bottom so it doesn't poof up on you too much. And then just blind bake that for about 10 or 12 minutes, just until it's lightly golden brown. And while that's baking, you can start your filling. I like to start with the heavy cream powder and go ahead and mix it up. So what I did, remember that's 1 cup of heavy cream powder. And in that blender cup, that's 1 cup of water. And we're just going to turn this into heavy cream. So empty that little baggie of powder into your blender cup and just give that a good blend, and that way you'll make sure there's no lumps. Okay, and then I just set that to the side, and into a large bowl I emptied the egg and cheese mixture and added 1 1/4 cups of water. That amount of water should be perfect to rehydrate those eggs, the cheese, and the onions. And then you just go ahead and add the heavy cream. Of course, you could add other vegetables to this, like spinach or broccoli, but I'm keeping it pretty simple. All right, now let's saute that bacon. I like to put a little bit of butter in that pan. And then my oven timer went off and my crust was ready. Reduce your oven temperature down to 325. Your quiche is going to bake at a lower temperature than your crust did. And when your butter has melted, you can go ahead and add the bacon. You can add as many packages as you want. That's 2 packages of that bacon. And I like to saute it until it gets really foamy and very crispy. And then I cooled it for a little bit, and you definitely want to get rid of that excess grease. And I just used that paper towel method there. And after the bacon has cooled just a little bit, just a couple of minutes, I added it to the egg mixture. And that is your filling for your quiche. All right, so I went ahead and put the crust on a baking sheet just to make it a little bit easier to get in and out of the oven. I decided to use a measuring cup to put that filling in kind of gently because that little bit of crust, that it just wasn't quite high enough on the side. I didn't want the filling to spill over and cause problems in the oven, so I just gently ladled in that filling. I had a little bit of extra, and I'll show you in a minute what I did with it. And you'll bake it for somewhere between 50 and 60 minutes, just until the middle is not jiggly. I had some extra filling, and I baked it just in a little ramekin, and it baked for probably 40 or 45 minutes. And it's wonderful. Don't waste any extra filling. Go ahead and bake that up. That's just like a crustless quiche, and it's so tasty. So here's our quiche when it comes out of the oven. It has a nice poof to it. It will sink as it cools, but it's just such a lovely egg dish. See how the green onions kind of floated to the top? You can see flecks of bacon there, and of course that cheese browned up really nicely. I just thought it was beautiful. I let it cool for probably 15 minutes while I visited with my daughter. And then when it's time to plate up, you can just get a knife and cut that into wedges. We got 8 wedges, but of course you could do 6 or even 4 giant wedges. That would be a really large serving. But here's our Quiche Lorraine. Isn't that lovely? It's so beautiful. And y'all, it tastes amazing. If you like quiche, I think you're going to like this one. It's sliced up beautifully and it cuts easily. And y'all, that crust. It's so good in that crust. I'm just a huge fan of the crust now. I fall more in love with it every time I make it. But see how nice this is? I think it would be wonderful, even for company. Okay, let's talk about the crust for a minute. Look at those flaky layers. Oh, I'm telling y'all, that's a really good recipe. I hope you try it. Next, I have your first Easter egg or your first extra little recipe, and it's for pea salad. I love a pea salad, especially at Easter, but y'all, I'm the only one in my family that will eat this. Nobody else likes it, so I didn't really want to make a huge serving of this. So just a couple of servings here. It's really easy. I will put this recipe down in the description box, but all you do is you take a pint-sized jar, some freeze-dried peas and some freeze-dried cheddar, along with a little freeze-dried red onion if you have it, or you could use regular chopped onion. Fill that with enough water to make it float and then refrigerate it overnight. The next morning you'll drain it and then make a little dressing for it. And pea salad dressing is very simple. It's like a little sour cream, a little mayo, a tiny bit of sugar, salt and pepper, super simple. And yes, you can use the shelf-stable sour cream that you've refreshed, and you can use my mayonnaise mix in a jar recipe for this. It works great. You'll need some shelf-stable bacon that you crisp up and some almond slivers that you toast. And then you just combine everything. Pour the peas and the cheddar into the dressing, add your crumbled bacon, and add your almond slivers. And that's all there is to it. You just stir this up, and I think it's really good fresh, but you could also refrigerate this. It's good the next day even. The almonds will soften just a little bit, but it should still be really, really good. Now, I don't know if this is maybe just a southern thing. I'm not sure, but this pea salad, it's very popular down in the South and in Texas. So it seems like I would see this at, of course, at Easter, whenever there's a potluck at the Baptist church. I'll just say that. It's so yummy. I will put the full recipe down in the description box below because this is just like a little bonus recipe. This is very similar to the macaroni salad recipe I brought y'all last Easter, and it's really similar to my broccoli crunch salad recipe. So anyway, if you want like more in-depth instructions, you can refer to those videos that I have up on my channel already. All right, next we have my company potatoes. Some people call these funeral potatoes. I put this up on my channel just like 4 or 5 months ago, so it's a fairly new recipe, but boy, is it ever delicious and perfect at Easter time. If you're new to my channel, you might not know this, but the reason I have a lot of Thrive Life ingredients in my videos is because I used to sell that food, so I have a lot of it. It has since gone out of business, but it doesn't really matter what brand you have. You can use your own home freeze-dried food. You can use other brands of freeze-dried food. They should all work. I needed about 3 servings of this, so I went ahead and got out a quart-sized jar. And that's what the recipe down below that I'll write, the exact measurements, I'll write that in the description box. That's what the recipe down below is going to reflect, is 3 good sized servings. If you don't need that much food, you just feel free to cut all this in half. That should work just fine as well. All right, in with the diced potatoes, I am adding some ingredients for the creamy and yummy sauce. The first thing I added was some cream of soup mix. So that recipe is up on my channel. I'll link to it below. And the next thing I'm adding is some French onion soup mix. Again, I have that recipe on my channel. You could sub it with an envelope of onion soup mix if you don't have my homemade version. I'm also including some of my cheese sauce. I'll link that copycat recipe below. You could use the Thrive Life cheese sauce. And I've got some sour cream powder going in here, as well as some butter powder. So I bet you can tell with all of those fantastic, yummy, creamy, and cheesy ingredients, this is going to be so, so good. You might give that a tap, tap, tap and settle those ingredients. In goes some freeze-dried cheddar. Now I went ahead and pulsed that in the blender just to make it a really fine powder, and it's gonna melt really nicely in my sauce if it's already blended. I wanted to make this a full-on meal, so I'm gonna be adding some freeze-dried chicken here, and that's the freeze-dried pulled chicken from Freeze Dry Wholesalers. And if you don't have that kind, you could use a freeze-dried grilled chicken or chicken slices. That works well. If you're not wanting to make this a full-on meal, you could just fill that in with whatever you like. You can add more potatoes, you could add zucchini, other vegetables. Just so the jar is full, this recipe will work. If you shake it down every once in a while and kind of settle those ingredients and the gaps and the spaces, then you'll have more room at the top of your jar for more ingredients. So I got an additional probably 1/4 cup of chicken there just by settling those ingredients down. And like I said, you could just fill that in with more potatoes if you want this just to be a side dish. Just so your jar is full, it's going to work. All right, so here's your jar that you could keep stored on your pantry shelf, and then it'll be ready and waiting for you. And that is just a huge convenience for my family. I really enjoy cooking with shelf-stable ingredients. If you are interested in getting more of my recipes in cookbook form, I have 2 cookbooks that are for sale in print. Those are on Amazon. I also have them available in a digital download. That's on my website. I'll link to all of this below. And I just came out with a new soups cookbooklet. and it's got probably 42 or so recipes. It's just $6.99. I will link that below as well. Whenever you're ready to make this, it is a simple just add water recipe. You can get out a large skillet, and then I added about 3.5 cups of water to that. And y'all, all you have to do is stir it, get some heat going, and you'll want to bring this to a bubble. Now, I don't know what y'all's experience is with the freeze-dried potatoes, but in my experience, they are stubborn little boogers. I don't know what it is about those freeze-dried potatoes, but they don't really want to get soft very quickly. So this is how I do it. I leave it on a medium heat, so I'm not rushing anything. I put it on medium and I bring it up to a slow boil, and then I reduce that heat down to medium low. So I landed at a 3.5 out of 10 on my stove, and that was the perfect bubbly temperature. And I just let it go for 15 minutes. So it probably took about 5 minutes to come to a boil on medium. Then I reduced the heat to medium low and let it go for 15 minutes. Okay, so for me, that was the perfect amount of time to make sure that those potatoes got good and tender. So I don't know, you'll have to tell me down below what your experience is with the potato dices, but for me, mine are pretty stubborn and it takes a good amount of time to get them tender. So as that cooks, it's going to reduce and it will darken and it will thicken. And you do need to come along every once in a while and stir this. So probably every 3 or 4 minutes, come give it a stir. Just because you've got cheese in there and those potatoes, everything's going to want to stick. So be sure to come along and stir it from the bottom. So here's what mine looked like after 15 minutes of that simmer. See how much thicker that is now? And if you'll notice, the potatoes are still nice and chunky. All right, so go ahead and give that a taste. You can adjust your seasonings at this point in time. I didn't add a thing. Now's a good time to add that crunchy, buttery topping. I cooked this in an oven-safe skillet. I didn't even have to transfer this to a casserole dish. I took some corn flakes and I busted them up in a little baggie, added some melted butter, and I threw that in the oven and put it under the broiler for just about 3 minutes. I got it a little toasty on the top, and that's all there is to it. You could use Ritz crackers, you could use panko breadcrumbs. I like the corn flakes. But y'all, you do have to let it sit and just rest for at least 5 minutes. You need that sauce to tighten up. It'll be too loose if you immediately try to serve it. So give it like 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, that's all you need. And that sauce is gonna firm up and your casserole will be ready to serve at that point. Isn't that a lovely potato casserole? Our company potatoes. I think it's really, really pretty. And hopefully you can see that it's a really nice texture. So those potatoes are still good and chunky, and they are just surrounded by that lovely, cheesy, creamy sauce. And of course, I've got chicken in mine, right? You don't have to do the chicken, but I really like the chicken in here. I've got an idea, but hang in there with me, okay? It's just an idea. What if you wanted to stick with the adding some sort of a protein into this jar, but you didn't want the chicken, and you really wanted to make this Easter-like and add some sort of ham to it? Okay, have you seen they have canned ham, right? Maybe you could add some of that, or even Spam. If you like Spam, it just seems like that would be a great combination. Spam and cheesy potatoes. It kind of sounds good. Anyway, there's just an idea for you. Up next, my personal favorite, yeast rolls. I've got another recipe for a mix in a jar for you. This one is for some soft and fluffy yeast rolls. Now, since they have yeast in them, you will need to make sure to check the expiration date on your yeast, whatever kind of yeast you use. I'm using an instant yeast. It's for bread machines, but it works in this application as well. And this is an enriched dough, so it's got some butter, some sour cream, some eggs in there, and some sugar. This is a very rich dough, but it makes for the softest, the most fluffy, tender yeast rolls. Let me show you how I put it together. In a quart-sized jar, I'm going to layer these ingredients. Now I'm going to get about 15 medium-sized rolls, and you can scale this recipe up or down according to your needs. It's really important that you fluff the flour first and then spoon it or scoop it into the measuring cup versus putting your measuring cup into the flour and scooping that way. It just helps you not to get too much flour in this recipe. So you'll need 2 2/3 cups of all-purpose flour. And I scrape off the top just to make sure I have exactly that amount in my cup. And to that, I'm going to add 2.5 tablespoons of sugar. It makes the rolls just barely mildly sweet. And here comes the scrambled egg mix. It's perfect for these rolls. I love using our eggs for baking. Now, I'm using butter powder and sour cream powder just because our butter powder does not have a lot of fat in it, and I need that added fat to enrich the dough, so I'm supplementing it with the sour cream. And our instant milk goes in there, as well as a teaspoon of kosher salt. To keep the yeast separate and just in a baggie, it's 2 teaspoons of the yeast. You could use active dry yeast if you like, and you could also just put a packet of yeast in there. It's about 2 1/4 teaspoons, but it doesn't matter, it would work too. Now in a second baggie, I've got some egg mix because I want to do an egg wash on the top of the rolls before I bake them. And that's all that really needs to go into your jar. Very few ingredients, but it makes a fantastic yeast roll. Now my mom, when I was growing up, she kept a sourdough starter, but for those years when she did not have her sourdough starter going, she made the best yeast rolls, and this is my interpretation of her recipe. I'm going to use a mixer to help me knead these rolls. If you don't have a stand mixer, this can be done by hand. It just takes a bit of effort, so I'm going to use the mixer to help me reduce the effort that I'm putting out to make these. So when you're ready to make them, just take out those little baggies, the yeast and the egg baggie, give everything else a shake, and then add your yeast to the mix. I think it helps a little bit just to mix things around to start with. And then you'll add the mix into the bowl that has a cup of hot tap water in it. I just like to mix it up so that it's the entire mix that's hitting the hot water and not just the yeast or just the salt or whatever. So add the mix to the bowl with the hot water. Put your dough hook attachment onto your mixer and then just start it on low. Now it will take a few minutes to combine this, but it eventually will come together. And like I said, you could definitely just do this in a bowl with a spoon. That would work fine. This dough you'll have to knead for about somewhere between 5 and 8 minutes. And you'll notice the longer you knead, whether you're doing this in a KitchenAid or by hand, you'll notice that the dough will change textures and the consistency of the dough will change the longer you knead it. And that is expected. That's what we want. That's what you're looking for. A couple of times you'll have to come along and scrape down the sides of your bowl. Just make sure all of the ingredients are getting kneaded. So after about 8 minutes of this kneading process, and I did scrape down the bowl probably 3 times, the dough is ready. And you'll know when it's ready when it wants to stick to itself rather than sticking to the bowl or the spatula or your hands. It just kind of wants to come together, and that's what you're looking for. See, as I scrape that, it's wanting to come off the sides and the bottom of the bowl and stick to its friends in the dough. You'll want to lightly flour your surface and turn out the dough onto the floured surface. And then you can lightly flour the top of it and your hands as well. And all you're wanting to do at this point is to be able to handle the dough without it sticking to the counter or sticking to your hands. You might add just a little bit of flour. It shouldn't need much. And all I'm doing is shaping this into a log because I want to cut this into 15 even portions to get the 15 rolls. So the way I do it is I cut my log into thirds, and then I cut each of those portions into 5. So I get my 15 that way. You'll want to keep this covered with either a damp towel or a damp paper towel, and then you can shape your rolls. So what you'll want to do is just take a portion of that dough and flatten it onto a little bit of flour, okay? And then you'll pinch up those edges and make like a little coin purse. Flip it over and shape it into a ball using your thumb and your pinky. And see, it's nice and smooth on the top, and the bottom's not too bad either. I'm using a Pampered Chef casserole dish there, and I just sprayed the bottom of it with some cooking spray. Let me show you that process again. I floured the bottom of it because I don't want it to stick, and I'm just pulling in the sides and pinching it together, kind of like a little coin purse. And then I'll just flip that over. And then taking my thumb and my pinky in the shape of a C, I'm just gonna roll, roll, roll. And the tension from the countertop that has not been floured in that section will help to shape that round roll for you. And then you just kind of rinse and repeat. Do that all 15 times. It doesn't take that long, honestly. Once you figure out how to get that ball made, it will just fly by. So there are my 15 rolls, and you'll want to cover those with some plastic wrap and put them in a warm place to rise. They need about 45 minutes depending on the temperature of your kitchen, etc. I found that the best place to put those is in my oven with the oven off, but with the light on, and the heat from the light bulb is plenty to create the rise that I need. It helps that yeast to bloom. Now you can preheat your oven and go ahead and make that egg wash I was talking about earlier. So you can empty that little baggie of egg mix into a bowl, add about 2 tablespoons of water to that, and give it a good mix. This is thinner than a regular egg would be, but that's what we want. We want this to be an egg wash. Carefully remove your plastic wrap and see how nice and fluffy those rolls have risen. They are just gorgeous. They're at least double in size. And you can gently brush that egg wash onto the top of your rolls. All right, now it's ready to put into a 350-degree oven. My rolls baked for exactly 21 minutes. And aren't those gorgeous? Just look at those. Oh gosh, y'all, my kitchen smells so good at this point. I love the smell of yeast bread baking. It's just one of the most heavenly scents here on earth. I love to brush these with just a tablespoon or so of butter. That's optional, but I like to do that. And how about that? Just look at those. And see how fluffy? There's just a nice bounce back to them. At this point, I had already eaten one. I couldn't resist, they're so good. But they pull apart just beautifully. See, they are so tender. Now, if I was going to compare these to something that you might have had before, I was thinking about it, and I think maybe if you have been to the Texas Roadhouse and had their rolls, these are similar to that. They're also similar to the dinner rolls that you get at the Bush's Chicken. I don't know if y'all have those restaurants where you live. Those are two places that have similar rolls. Okay, but just see how tender that is. Y'all, these taste amazing. They're just mouth-wateringly wonderful. They're good by themselves. They're good alongside any main dish you want to serve them with. They're wonderful warm with butter. A little bit of honey would be great. Up next is a fantastic side in a jar. I'm calling it spring green pasta and cream. And I think this recipe is just based on something I saw on the Food Network. Maybe it was Ina Garten, the Barefoot Contessa. She has such great recipes. Anyway, this cream sauce has a really nice richness to it, but it is lightened up by the use of some lemon powder. So that kind of just freshens things up. It makes it a little bit brighter. It's not heavy at all. The green vegetables that go in here that I'm going to use are green onions, asparagus, and peas. Now you could use whatever freeze-dried vegetables you like, but this is a really great combination. You'll need some heavy cream powder, cream cheese powder. Make sure, as always, that you check your expiration date on these things and use it before it goes bad on your shelf, of course. That'll taste a lot better, I promise you. I'm going to start with a quart-sized jar. You could definitely serve this as a main dish. I think you might get maybe about 3 servings out of that. And if you're using it as a side dish, I think at least 4 or 5 servings. So in my jar, I just went ahead and put kind of the solid things and then the powdered things on top. And the idea is the powders, they kind of settle down into the cracks and crevices and fill in the spaces and those gaps. And they really don't take much extra room on the top there. And you're definitely going to have to give it a little shimmy and a shake every once in a while and get the powders down. But there's plenty of room in the jar for this. I am including some Parmesan cheese in here, and it just gives it some great flavor. You might be thinking that's a lot of creamy things, but it's just a couple tablespoons of this and a couple tablespoons of that. It's just, think of it like it's like adding a dollop of sour cream or a pat of butter, that kind of thing, and it ends up a fantastic cream sauce. And as always, I will put the full recipe and my shopping link in the description box below. I love using these True Lemon packets. I have True Lemon and True Lime packets, and they're just so yummy. And you can put those on the top of the jar as well as your oxygen absorber, and then it would be ready to store on your pantry shelf. Isn't that lovely? I made a quart size, but you could definitely cut this recipe in half if you just want to make a pint-sized jar. Now, I think these green peas and this asparagus is perfect for a spring green recipe, but if you don't have those things or you don't like them, you can substitute other vegetables. I think zucchini or spinach would be good. You just do what you want to do. Let me show you how easy this is to make. You get out a medium-sized pan and then you dump the ingredients in there and add water. That's about it. It's a simple recipe. There's nothing difficult about this. It's really like a dump and go dish. It's so easy. I went ahead and added 4.5 cups of water. I thought 4 was just not quite enough because of the size of the pasta I put in there. And then don't forget, at the end, we're going to add our true lemon packets for that burst of light lemon flavor. So what I did was I brought that to a boil on probably a medium-high heat. After it reached a boil, I turned it down to a medium. I boiled that for about 15 minutes. It takes a little bit longer to cook the pasta when you're cooking it in the cream sauce, and that's just because it's a thicker sauce that you're putting it in. The back of my pasta box said it would be al dente in 9 to 11 minutes, but it took mine about 4 more minutes. I cooked it for 15 minutes to get it to where I wanted it to be. Be sure you come along and stir that from the bottom every once in a while. All right, when you think the pasta's done, go ahead and add that true lemon. And like I said, I think 3 packets is perfect, but hey, you do whatever you like. You can scale that up or down. Be sure to give it a taste and make any adjustments that you need. When it's tender, go ahead and take it off of the heat and just cover it. Let it stand for about 5 minutes. During that time, your pasta will absorb a good bit of that sauce, and the sauce will thicken as it stands. And it just gets to be the perfect consistency. You want your pasta to be good and coated in the sauce, but you don't want it to be swimming in liquid. So that is why I let it sit for just a little bit. And now it's ready to serve up. I served this alongside some chicken that Drew had grilled outside, but I think you could serve this as a main dish as well. Those peas have quite a bit of protein in them, and I think if you ate this as a main dish, I think you would be full. And I also think it's so delicious, it really doesn't even need anything next to it. It's fantastic. I do like to garnish this with some fresh herbs from my herb garden outside. I do that all the time. I pair freeze-dried ingredients with fresh, and they just go perfectly together. I think it really elevates your freeze-dried food if you add some fresh things to it. And I just really enjoyed filming this part. Oh, y'all, this tastes so good. That little hint of lemon just lightens it up. The cream sauce is delicate. It's delicious. It's a fantastic side dish. And I think it'd be good next to an Easter ham, a pork loin, grilled chicken like we did. I think it would be great with grilled fish. Just anything you want, it would pair beautifully with. It's like a one-pot wonder for a side dish. It's really, really good. I hope y'all give it a try. All right, and finally, it's time for the dessert. What's it going to be? Hummingbird cake, possibly? Or is it going to be lemon squares? Those would have both been good. How about the strawberry cheesecake crinkle cookies? Those would all be great on an Easter buffet. But no, we have, drumroll please, coconut cream pie. Yay! Okay, and believe it or not, y'all, this recipe can be completely shelf stable, even the topping. I'm not even kidding. So I'm going to talk you through how you can do that. I will include the full recipe down in the description box below because this is a new recipe. I've never showed y'all this before, and this video right here is not even a full-length video. So I will go ahead and write the recipe down below. So if you want to try it, you can make it. Now you are going to need a pie crust, and since I already showed you in this video how to make my pie crust, I'm not going to do that again. This right here is just what my pie crust mix looks like. I keep mine in the refrigerator actually, and I went ahead and made a single pie crust. I baked that up and I let it cool. So that's the first thing you're going to need to do for this coconut cream pie. Now for the filling, these are all things that you can keep on your pantry shelf, okay? You're going to mix these things together. I used a microwave safe bowl because, spoiler alert, I cook this in the microwave because it's faster. Okay, sugar, cornstarch, scrambled egg mix, that's the equivalent of 2 full eggs, kosher salt, some vanilla powder, and then after you mix those dry ingredients together, you add some coconut milk, some evaporated milk, and then you stir it together really nicely, and you can either cook this on the stovetop, which is fine, 12 to 15 minutes or so to get it to thicken. Or you can cook it in the microwave, which is what I did. I put it in for about maybe a minute and a half to start with, and then I stirred it and cooked it in 30-second increments for maybe 5 minutes total until it was completely thickened, like a nice thick pudding. And then you add the shredded flaked coconut. And I recommend using the sweetened flaked coconut. And then you just let that cool. I let it cool in the refrigerator overnight. And then the next morning, whenever I was ready to assemble this pie, I gave it a really good stir. You can toast some coconut, some extra coconut, have that toasted, and that's going to be for the topping. So whenever you're ready to assemble this thing, what you'll do is you'll get your cooled pie crust, and then onto the pie crust, you're going to add your filling. Since I had made mine the night before, this was really cold and really kind of stiff. I got that all inside the pie shell and then just went ahead and smoothed that out and made it really nice and even. And then it's ready for a topping. So you have options for your topping. I cheated and just used some Cool Whip. And that is definitely like the easiest way to go. But I wanted to show you, you could do completely shelf stable. I mean, from top to bottom with this pie. So if you want to do that, you can use Dream Whip. Do you know what Dream Whip is? Do you remember Dream Whip? I remember my grandmother using Dream Whip. Okay, it's this powdered mixture that you can combine with milk and a little bit of vanilla. Of course, you could use instant milk that you combine with water, and there's your milk. And then you can add some vanilla powder to that, and there you go. You can whip that up, and you would have a nice whipped topping. If you don't want to do either of those options I just gave you, you can make my meringue topping, okay? Do you remember my meringues? Those are made from shelf-stable ingredients. You can use that same meringue topping and put it on top of this coconut cream pie, and then you can put it either under the broiler for just a couple of minutes to brown up those peaks, or you can use a creme brulee torch and brulee the top. You have options for toppings here. But yeah, you can make this from 100% shelf-stable things. Add just a sprinkling of toasted coconut. That's all there is to it. That's all you need. Okay, let me tell you about the flavor here. It is wonderful. It's sweet. A coconut cream pie is very sweet. I think the filling itself is supposed to be sweet, and then the topping kind of cuts that sweetness. And the sprinkling of the toasted coconut on top of all of that, well, it's just such a nice crunch. The crust here, you do have options with this crust. If you don't want to make my homemade crust, you don't have to. You could use a pre-made graham cracker crust or make one yourself. Even those little tart shells, those little tartlet shells, you could make several individual pies. So you have options for the crust. But I will say that I think because of the nature of the super sweet coconut cream filling, that if you pair it with a regular pie crust like I'm showing you here, I think that's the way to go. Because like the savoriness of the pie crust and the kind of lack of sweetness, and it's almost like a neutral flavor, I think that crust is the perfect pie crust for a coconut cream pie. That's just my opinion. I hope you try this recipe, and I hope you love it. And let me tell you, it was a big hit here at the house and at my husband's office. I sent it to work with him for a potluck that next day, and they loved it. They raved about it. And don't you just think this would be a fantastic pie to add to your Easter brunch? Who doesn't love a coconut cream pie on Easter? Well, all right, guys, that's all I have for you for today. Please do be a friend and leave me a comment below. Hit that thumbs up button. That always helps these videos to get out to more people. And I really do appreciate your understanding whenever I make these videos that are compilation videos or favorites videos, and I'm using some of my older things. And every once in a while I'll refer to, my shopping link for Thrive Live, or to link a recipe down below, or things like that. And then, that is no longer the case. Thrive Life is closed, and I might not have that exact link down in the description box. I just appreciate your understanding about it, because like I said, some of these are older videos. The situation has changed. All right, it's time for our verse of the day, and I've got a couple for today because it's Easter. The first one I'm going to share with you, Hebrews 12, verse 2. And it reads, "We look to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God." And let's remember that he is at the right hand of the throne of God because he is a risen Savior. We serve a risen Savior. That's what we celebrate at Easter. And here's a verse I'll bring to you from Luke chapter 24, verses 5 and 6. It's actually an angel that's speaking to the women who've come to the tomb to dress the body with spices. And he says to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? For he is not here, but he has risen." Praise the Lord for that. All right. I pray you'll have a wonderful day, a blessed Easter weekend. And until next time, y'all take care and keep thriving.